Right, guys, welcome back to the very final video of Unit 1 Outcome 3, and of course also the final video for Unit 1 overall. So here we are talking about special interest groups. So this is going to be something that is definitely new to you. Most of what we cover in the video here, and at this stage, I'm assuming that very few of you would be able to explain what we even mean by a special interest group. So this one is a little bit different to some of the others. So make sure you pay attention and get your head around this stuff. It's not overly complicated, but like I said, this is going to be new. So there we see it in our study design, special interest groups such as, and it gives us 4 different examples within that. Okay, so the study design gives us a little bit of a script to follow. So here is our final look at this diagram. By now, this should be firmly implanted in your brain so that you can reproduce this, identifying which are the 6 factors that sit in the macro environment that we've looked at, and then the 4 that sit within the operating environment. So in the first question, like I said, you will probably not be aware of this right now. So what even is a special interest group? Okay, so these are groups, organizations, associations that basically put pressure on businesses to adopt certain operational practices or change the way in which a business operates. That will make more sense as we move through the video, but that is a basic definition for you. Now, they can be groups of individuals who have some kind of interest in the activities of a business, such as customers, they could be employees, or they could be, as we look at in a minute, environmental groups. But the whole point here is they put pressure on business in some way to kind of make some changes or operate in a certain way. Now, point of this is when you're planning a business, you need to make sure that you take into account the interests of any special interest groups that might have an interest in what you're doing as a business owner, basically to avoid any unwanted negative publicity or conflict. Okay, that's kind of what this is about. So you need to be aware of any SIGs that might be interested in what you're doing to avoid any conflict and negative publicity. Now, as I said before, the study design gave us 4 different groups, 3 actually: environmental lobby groups, business associations, and unions. So they're the 3 types that we are going to look at, the 3 categories of SIG. So starting off with environmental lobby groups, look, there's some examples here. You would have heard of some of them, at least I would hope. Presumably you would have heard of the World Wildlife Fund, or the Worldwide Fund for Nature. I'm assuming you would have heard of that, maybe even the ACF, the top one there. But look, there's tons of these, okay? There's 4 examples, but there are literally hundreds of different environmental lobby groups operating all around the world. Obviously, their focus is on the environment, sustainability, that kind of thing. Some of them might be very kind of broad-based, and some of them might have quite a specific angle. But something to do with the environment, sustainability, and looking after, the planet on which we live is going to be their focus. So to define them as a group, okay, these are organizations that advocate and campaign for the protection of the environment and promote sustainability both to governments and to the public. Now, individual lobby groups might just be to the public, some might be to the government, some might be both, but that's kind of who they're lobbying to. Now, if a business is planning to undertake some activities that might potentially cause some harm to the environment, then these groups might take an interest in your business, okay? And then what might happen is they might campaign to the public and even to the government to stop the activities that you are thinking about doing that could potentially cause harm. Stop those activities from happening, or even stop your business from operating. Now, of course, this is not going to be relevant to all types of business. In fact, this is not going to be relevant to probably most types of business, particularly small business. But there are some businesses which obviously have the potential to do some kind of environmental impact. So you just need to be aware of what that impact might be and who might be kind of taking an interest in your business and the actions that they might take. So how do these organizations, how do these environmental lobby groups actually apply pressure to a business? A few different ways. First off, advocacy and lobbying. Okay. So basically, they get involved in advocacy efforts to influence public policy and encourage the development and the enforcement of environmental regulations, okay, laws. Okay. That puts pressure on businesses to comply with certain environmental standards. Okay. So this is more about putting pressure on businesses to make sure they're kind of sticking to the letter of the law, in effect, and any rules and regulations, laws that relate to environmental impact are being followed. They might do public awareness campaigns. Okay, public awareness campaigns, including social media these days, would be a huge one. Press releases, interviews, basically informing consumers about the environmental practices of specific businesses, particularly businesses, obviously, that the environmental lobby group or groups involved, businesses that they deem to be not being socially responsible, not operating in an environmentally safe way or a sustainable way, and kind of basically telling the world about that. Yeah, so this is a bad news story, which as a business owner, you do not want. Okay, so this obviously then puts pressure on businesses to improve their environmental performance, to maintain a positive public image, and therefore profit. Okay, so that's a huge part of what a lot of these environmental lobby groups do. And with social media as it is now, it's so much easier for them to get their message out there, hit a really, really large number of people in one hit. Not good news if your business is the focus of that campaign. A little bit more proactive here, consumer activism. They might encourage consumers to boycott certain businesses or certain products, or support other certain products if they deem them to be more sustainable or environmentally friendly. And this is all going to be based on the environmental practices of the businesses behind them. Okay, this obviously can impact profitability of impacted businesses. And again, the whole point of this is, on the part of the environmental lobby groups, is to get these businesses to change the way they operate, to start to adapt or adopt more environmentally friendly practices that are not going to have the negative impact on the environment that they maybe are right now. And of course, if you turn that around, you're going to regain your consumer trust and build your image. And again, all of that, it leads back to increased sales and profitability. So a bunch of different things they can do. Ultimately, okay, this is kind of the extreme, they may litigate. Okay, so in some cases, they might have gone through the other stuff there, but no change. Environmental groups may then resort to legal action, okay, to actually hold businesses legally accountable for any environmental violations that they feel the business is involved in, okay? And those lawsuits can result in fines, court-mandated changes in business practice, whatever it might be. So that's kind of like the ultimate place it might go. But generally speaking, they would go through the first kind of raft of things that we looked at before. And the idea is hopefully that would enforce the change. But if that doesn't, then they basically can take businesses to court. Now, on the flip side of all of that, if a business is planning on having a positive impact on the environment, you can actually talk to these environmental lobby groups and get consultation, and they can actually maybe provide advice on how to operate in a sustainable way. So if you're a business owner and there's going to be something within your business that you're going to be doing that might have some kind of negative impact on the environment, or if you're thinking about how could I operate in a more sustainable way, these are great places to go for advice and consultation to actually help you with that. So you can actually use them in a positive way right from the outset as well. Now, the second of the three types was unions, okay? So again, there's some examples. Australian Federation of Air Pilots, the Australian Education Union, so on and so forth. There are hundreds of these. There is basically unions covering every type of industry, every type of worker in Australia. Okay, so there's some examples for you to define what a union is. And also just in there, it says, also refer to a trade union. So if you see the term trade union, means the same thing. I mean, trade union is the full term, but often that just gets shortened to union. Okay, so trade union, same thing. Basically, an organization exists to represent and speak on behalf of employees in a particular industry. So you saw there, the education union, the pilots union, so on and so forth. So the union covers the workers in a particular type of industry or a type of job. And what they do is represent and campaign on behalf of the employees in that industry. And one of the big things they do is negotiate to improve wages and working conditions for their members. So there's a whole bunch of stuff they do, but fundamentally they're there to represent, speak on behalf of their members. So the type of people that they cover, the type of worker, and negotiating and trying to improve wages and working conditions for the people within that industry. So basically, how does this impact us as a new business owner? So when you're planning your business, what you need to do is find out if there is a union for employees in the particular industry that you're going to be operating in. So for example, if you're operating a fast food restaurant, there is a union that covers that. There's a union that covers retail workers. There's a few unions that cover hospitality workers. So you need to basically find out which union or which unions might be representing the employees that are going to ultimately end up working for you. If there is a union, and there probably will be, you need to be aware that these unions have a lot of influence over wages and conditions for the employees that are members of that union. Now, unions use a whole range of strategies to put pressure on businesses and to advocate for the rights and the interests of their members. Those strategies might depend on the specific goal they're trying to achieve at that time or the context of what they're doing. But here are just some examples of ways in which unions can exert pressure on businesses. Now, first off, collective bargaining. Okay, I said before, one of the key things that they do, one of the primary functions of a union is to engage in collective bargaining with employers. What that means is the union negotiates with the employers the wages and conditions for the workers. So each worker at a business doesn't negotiate their own wages. The union would do that collectively on behalf of all the workers in that industry who are members of the union. So they negotiate with employers and they're looking to secure better wages, better benefits, better working conditions, and all the other terms of employment that would apply for their members. They can threaten strikes, threaten work stoppages, all sorts of different things to put pressure on businesses to kind of come to the table and kind of accede to their demands, if you like. Okay, so this is a really, really key part of what unions are there to do. The unions basically negotiate with the employers everything around wages and working conditions, rather than everybody doing it themselves. It's the collective one. Now, we just mentioned strikes and work stoppages, so this is where it might go if negotiations in that process are not going well. So unions can threaten strikes. Okay, so this means stop works. The employees, stop work for a period of time. Usually it's a day, but there might be multiple days over a period of weeks or months. A really powerful tool used by unions to disrupt business operation and draw attention to their demands. Okay, so the idea is, if the union and the businesses will not agree, it might be the union's pushing for a 10% wage increase and the businesses don't want to pay a 10% wage increase, to get their message across, they call everybody on strike. And the idea is then if the business goes, oh my God, we're going to have to shut down for a day, that's huge lost productivity. That's a big cost to a business. So the idea on the part of the union is try to get the employers to agree to their demands. And you see this on the news all of the time. Okay, so the idea is here ultimately to try to motivate businesses to negotiate and reach a resolution with the union. And this is just an example I saw just the other day. In fact, someone was telling me about this. This is actually a Queensland story. It's up in Brisbane. And this is from, where are we here? April 30th, 2024. It's very, very recent. City held hostage as tradies demand 240k salary as union lashes out at woeful mismanagement. Basically, the CFMEU, you can see in there mentioned in the second block, the Construction, Forestry, Maritime Employees Union. That's a huge union in the building industry, the construction industry. Very, very powerful union right around Australia. They are getting workers to walk off the job, in other words, strike, because the union's calling for pay rises, which would see, and this is kind of why it caught my attention, an entry-level worker earn an eye-watering $240,000 per year. Staggering amount for a kind of entry-level tradie. Now, there is a bit more to that amount of money than meets the Irish, and obviously this is a headline grabber that does involve a whole bunch of allowances and stuff, but still it's a lot of money. But this is an example of the union putting the pressure on these businesses. So this is a huge construction project going on in Brisbane, $6.3 billion construction project, and the CFMU are not happy with the pay rises that are being offered. They want more. So they're encouraging the workers to walk off the job, obviously in an attempt to put pressure on the construction projects to actually meet their demands and pay what they're asking. Okay, kind of in a simple context. Another type of action that they can do is work to rule. So instead of actually striking outright and walking off the job or not going to work, unions might instruct their members to strictly adhere to work rules and contractual obligations, slowing down production without formally stopping the work. So that can create difficulties for businesses and highlight the importance of the workforce. Like an example I can give you there is back in 2013, something like that. It was a while ago now, in Victoria, the Education Union, which I was a member of at the time. Look, the government and the Education Union were kind of battling over the next agreement that was going to be put in place for teachers covering the next 4 years. And there was a huge disparity in the pay. The union, I forget the figures, but the union were asking for a certain pay rise each year over the 4 years of the agreement. The government was offering way less. Lots of negotiations. Ultimately, it did go to some strikes, but before it went to strikes, it went to work to rule. And basically what that meant was teachers in Victoria went to work to rule, which meant they just worked their 38-hour week and they didn't do any any duties that happened outside of the school day. So anything that happened in the evening didn't happen. And this was for a little while this went on. So like the parent-teacher interviews wouldn't have happened. Camps didn't happen. A lot of extracurricular stuff did not happen. I think that year even report writing didn't happen. A lot of marking didn't happen because the reality is a lot of what teachers do is unpaid. You know, we get paid for a basic 38-hour week. Most teachers work considerably more than 38 hours, and a lot of that is on their own time, but evenings, weekends, whenever it might be. And the idea was teachers stopped doing that. And then the idea was to prove to the government, look, and you know, a lot of stuff in school stopped happening. And the idea was to demonstrate to the government that, look, this is what happens. You know, teachers are working more. All we're doing is asking for fair pay. This is what happens when teachers actually do just what they're paid to do. And schools didn't exactly come to a halt, but a lot of the activities that happen in and around a school did. And it was not the best outcome for students. So there was an example of work to rule. Now, I think ultimately, if I remember rightly, that kind of didn't work because we actually ended up striking for 2 or 3 days a bit later on. But there's an example of work to rule. Demonstrations and protests. You see this all the time on the news. If you watch the news in the evenings, unions often organise public demonstrations, rallies and stuff, you know, walking up to Spring Street, walking up to Parliament, raising awareness about workplace issues. It might be pay, it might be something else. And the idea here is to garner public support, you know. This can create public relations nightmares for businesses, and it can influence public opinion about the business treatment of its workers. So again, this comes back to a business maintaining a positive image. It's not good to be seen by the public as someone that, you know, does not treat your workers well. So this is more, you know, putting pressure on business to kind of come to the table, change the way they operate, because it's not a good look for a business when you've got unions and thousands of people rallying in the city, you know, talking about your business and how you're not looking after your employees. Finally, again, a bit like the environmental lobby groups, legal action. So again, this is a last resort, but unions might take legal action against businesses for unfair labour practices if they uncover them, violations of any employment laws. And again, legal challenges can result in fines, injunctions, or various other consequences, which again pressure businesses to change their practices. And there's a little example here: union action over CBA, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, that is, working from home order, the Financial Services Union. So in other words, if you work in financial services, there's a fair chance you actually might be a member of the Financial Services Union. Up in arms about Commonwealth Bank's push to get workers back in the office. So they're talking about taking legal action. This is all about how, the world went to working from home in COVID. And since COVID kind of finished, or at least lockdowns finished, a lot of businesses, a lot of workers kind of wanted to continue to work from home. So that's been a huge thing around the world. The WFH is a big thing. A lot of workers now, I think I read the other day, 60% of Australian workers still work from home at least part of the week. And a lot of businesses, like the Commonwealth Bank, the bosses are kind of a bit over it, and they're now trying to force workers back into the office for various reasons. So again, you've got bosses want people back in the office. The Financial Services Union and its members want to remain working from home at least part of the time. We're kind of combating. So I think the union was considering some legal action against the CBA for this. And there's a story there. The Commonwealth Bank sent the order May the 24th. Staff currently working from home to have to return to the office to leave 50% from July the 17th. This would have been in 2023. So yeah, that did not go down well with the Financial Services Union. That was the specific issue there. Now, the final of the three, business associations. Again, you see a bunch of examples there. You might have heard of Master Builders Australia. A lot of these you will not have heard of. You'll see they look kind of like trade unions in a way with the names. But as we'll see in a minute, these are kind of to employers what the union is to employees. Okay, that's kind of the way to think of it. A definition for you: an organisation exists to support and advise businesses operating with a specific industry. And if you think back to unions, they were organisations that exist to support and advise employees. So this is kind of on the other side. That's why I said before, they're kind of like the unions, but for the businesses themselves rather than the employees. What happens is businesses can pay membership to the relevant association or associations covering their industry, and in return for their membership fees, they can access information and advice from the business association and a whole heap of other services and benefits. They can access training, seminars, news updates, conferences, blah 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 blah. But ultimately, if things get messy and there's negotiations, or again, if things go down a legal route, kind of like a union can represent the employees, the business association can potentially get involved in representing the business. So again, that's why I say they're in the red. Okay, a business association is close to being to a business what a union is to an employer. That's kind of a simple way to remember it, I guess. So you think the relationship that an employee has with the union, that's kind of like how the business or the employer has with the business association, just to kind of simplify it for our purposes. Now, the fundamental underlying message with all of this is, and I kind of said this at the beginning, but let's just finish up on this again. You're going to open a business, you're going to start a business. You need to be aware of any special interest group from whichever category we're talking about here, might have influence over your business, might take an interest in your business, or the employees that are going to be working for you, and plan for any such interactions. Okay. Also, be aware of which associations can be of benefit to you. Now, as makes sense, that's most likely to be from the business associations group. But as I also mentioned earlier, the environmental lobby group can provide advice on, how to operate in a more sustainable manner, that sort of thing. But underlying all of this is just be aware of any SIGs who might take an interest in what it is you're doing, or might represent employees that are working for you. You just need to be aware that they're out there on what they might be doing and how they might try to influence any change within your business. And that is it. So that's it for this key knowledge. That's it for outcome 3, and that's it for unit 1. I will see you back for the beginning of unit 2 in a little while. Cheers for now.